This is the second studio by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Miranda Board-Daronay. The two of us are architects, partners at the office, and of course, hosts of the show. And today it's the two of us in the studio, and we are going to talk about a few questions that came up in a recent panel that I was a part of. So I was part of a small panel, kind of an intimate setting, that was hosted by NOMAS, which is the National Organization of Minority Architecture Students. And they graciously invited me and a couple other people to be panelists and to talk about stuff. And the moderator did a great job, a student moderator, and then there's a Q&A session. And I actually thought that some of the questions they had were quite insightful and interesting. So we're just going to steal them from there. And I'll email this recording, to them and be like, if you wanted to hear us talk more, and here's the B-side to that conversation. And that's what we're going to talk about. Sponsors.
This episode of The Second Studio is brought to you by BQE Core, the all-in-one firm management software built for architects. Designed by architects for architects, Core helps you track time effortlessly, manage projects seamlessly, and get paid faster so you can focus on design, not spreadsheets. With powerful automation and real-time insights, it's everything you need to run a smarter, more profitable firm. See how BQE Core can transform your practice by clicking the link in our show notes.
The Second Studio podcast is sponsored by Autodesk. Do you know about Autodesk Forma? Available standalone or as part of their AEC Collection software bundle, it's a specialized AI-assisted 3D design tool that can transform early project planning. With Forma, you can rapidly model multiple massing options at the start of your projects and analyze the embodied carbon costs of different volumes, layouts, and material choices. You can then deepen your understanding of your sites by incorporating real-world contextual data for daylight, wind, noise, and more. Start your projects right with Autodesk Forma. Check out the link in our show notes to learn more. This is the Second Studio with the two of us. Here we go. All right, so many interesting questions were asked. The first one came from a student who has a passion, a creative hobby that's not architecture. And I think it was music in her case. And her question was, how do you balance having a creative hobby or passion that's outside of architecture with architecture? Because architecture is kind of all-consuming, or can be sometimes. If you're a student or even if you're a practicing professional, how do you balance those two worlds? And is it good or bad to have different things going on in your life beyond architecture?
Mm-hmm. So what was your answer to that question?
All right. Well, the question sort of came up because I think in my bio somewhere it said that I was a musician or studied music or did something in music. And I had to clarify, I don't do that anymore. I'm not a musician. I said jokingly, but seriously, on occasion I'll pick up the horn. I played the trumpet, pick up the horn and play for 5 minutes, and it'll be okay. And then it'll be very depressing afterwards because the chops are gone after 5 minutes. So I want to be very clear to everyone. I'm not like an active musician. There are a lot of architects and designers who are, and they're very talented. My answer was that I found having that other space of creativity, yes, but in my case, more a craft to hone and to focus on and to be really, really focused on. Having that other space was really important. It just was a way of breathing. It was almost like architecture was constantly inhaling, and then music for me was like an exhale. It was just like the down to the up. I needed that space to be in. Did it inform my designs as a student? Does it inform how I think about architecture and design today in the practice of architecture and designing buildings? Yes, it does. I've talked about that before. But I think more from almost an emotional regulation, standpoint, and creative regulation. It was critical for those purposes. So I felt very strongly looking back that I needed that, and I would not have sacrificed my time in the orchestras for more architecture at all. It was really, really difficult. Here's a quick anecdote, is I remember I had a studio that was one of the most difficult studios I ever taken throughout all of my years of education. And we had a final review, and no one had slept for 3 days leading up to that review, of course. And people were just crashing hard, burned out. I had a concert that same night, and it was a very bizarre thing in general to have these kind of almost dual lives, because the band world is its own thing and then architecture is its own thing. And there's only, I think, 2 or 3 students that did both. I'm including myself. Anyway, the night of that review presentation, I leave the review. Everyone else is going off and drinking or sleeping. I go up to the auditorium, put on a tux, and go perform as part of the orchestra. I was so tired that I fell asleep on stage. And that's to say, like, it was really difficult to balance those 2 things. And but I forced myself to always go and participate and be on time and be at rehearsals. And I'm glad I did, because it's not, for me, it wasn't worth it to try and sacrifice it for more time in the studio.
Yeah, and I think your case is a bit different too, because it was in school and it's not like you were playing the trumpet on the weekend, to have fun with your friends. Like, it was part of the grades that you signed up to get, right? Like, there's a little bit, it wasn't, I wouldn't necessarily think that it was a hobby in the sense that it's commonly understood as, because of the fact that you were enrolled in classes you had to attend, and those events you had to participate. It's not like in some ways you had the choice to skip a weekend of playing, or like could go to a bar instead of rehearsing. So it's a balance that I think maybe was more
organized, forced, required.
Yeah, in some ways you there was a structure that helped you balance out those 2, because you had commitment to that structure, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is what you mentioned, like the emotional balance of having that other thing of architecture. Either it fits on something that you are, committed as a student, like a membership or whatever you call it, to make you accountable to it. But I think it is interesting that it creates another place to kind of balance your emotions in some ways.
It was really weird. It was like really, really bizarre. I've always had difficulty jumping into a new group, whatever that group is, it'd be even office, the architecture student body, the orchestra student body, or a class, whatever, and just like assimilating and finding my place in that group. I've always kind of maintained a distance from groups. We've talked about this before too. And so it was just totally bizarre to be in the studio all the time with my very close friends and peers, and then just leave it and then go in this like almost different universe for an hour and a half twice a week for rehearsals and whatever else that was going on, with the other musical group ensembles I was part of, and be in that space with those people who have nothing to do with architecture. They don't look like architecture students. They don't talk like architecture students. They don't have the same interests as architecture students, broadly speaking. The school I went to was very engineering focused, so a lot of them were engineers. And it's like, now I'm in this, it was strange. And I didn't have like any close friends in the orchestra because I couldn't commit to that. And
I guess the situation is kind of weird, because architecture is so consuming that why would you sign up for something else that also requires so much work and attention and commitment?
That's a good question.
It's like, it's not like you double major, but in some ways, like, again, like, it's not, you do it whenever you feel like it. Like, that wasn't that. So one could ask, why would you do that? And then also, would you recommend doing that? And in the end, do you think it was, in some ways, it was worth it, or it was detrimental to either of them?
Well, so there's 2 things also. The school I went to, we had to do GEs, which are general education courses, which means that whilst you're at university, you're not just studying architecture. You have to also take classes in other general education subjects like history, philosophy, writing, communication, math, whatever else, that have, in a lot of ways, nothing directly to do with architecture. So then you layer on top this extracurricular enrollment into something like the bands. I think, going back to your question, I forgot your other question because I'm tired, but going back to your first kind of point of, because I was enrolled, there was a structure that helped me be committed to it. That's true. the same time, I would say I had plenty of courses that I was enrolled in that I would intentionally just skip so I could be in studio working on my projects. I did that all the time. Probably should not have, but I did all the time. I mean, to the point where like for the, 10 years after school, I'd have recurring nightmares where in the nightmare,
I mean,
I show up to class without anything and realize it's like a midterm. And I'm like, what? It's a midterm? I don't even have a pencil. That nightmare might be based on reality.
I've actually had a thought for April Fools to send you a fake letter from the school.
That would be good.
Like,
that would be good.
It's been however many years, we're still waiting for you to turn your paper in.
It's another night. So there's a couple nightmares that I've had over the last, they're kind of gone now, but for the first 10 years. And that one of them was that. Another one
That's a good one. I have to think of a victim we could do that.
I find out in the nightmare, 5 years after graduating that I missed this course, that I didn't take it or I didn't pass it. And therefore now I haven't actually finished and I have French to go back to school or something. Mm-hmm. And those nightmares are based on reality, like in my case. But so anyway, the odd thing about band for me was that I never missed a rehearsal and I never missed a concert. I'm certainly not a concert. I never missed. There's something about it and my dedication to it, and also the nature of band as well, but my dedication to it that would never allow me to miss it. And I might have said this on here before, but I had a close friend in architecture school and studio who would see me like leave studio, go to rehearsal in the evenings, because that's when they were, then come back afterwards. And he would see me drained, especially before a deadline. He'd be like, hey man, why are you even going? Just like skip it. And it was such a weird, an obvious question, but in my mind, it was a weird question because it never even occurred to me. The idea of skipping rehearsal, I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? He's like, you skip class all the time for like structures and stuff. Like, skip this. This is band. But for whatever reason, for me, I'm like, it's just not an option. It's absolutely not an option. And so I don't think I missed any rehearsals. I fell asleep during rehearsals, plenty. Yeah. But I never missed it. And so, but back to the larger question, for me, I think that first of all, as a student, I needed a healthier balance of life and architecture in general, and I think I would have used that balance to be better at music, or to be more awake at rehearsals, or to get more out of other classes. So I don't know. To answer the question, yeah, for me it was a necessity then, and looking back, I wish I had put more time into it. I will also say though, that in my final year during thesis, I took no music classes. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to do both. Mm-hmm. So there was a line that I drew at some point. Did you have any hobbies? Or more broadly speaking, did you find as a student or as a professional even that having other activities and things or life outside of architecture was necessary or important or influenced the work?
I mean, the time in school, I think I was so busy with school that I don't think I had any time for anything but school.
Your school also didn't have GEs.
We didn't have GEs, but we had classes like all the time in studio all the time. So
I'm not suggesting you had less work.
No, but
you didn't have to take
No, we didn't have to. No, but we had full schedules.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there's just no time, to like do other stuff. I mean, I was doing side jobs to make monies. That was my, that was the, hobby? That was replacing my hobbies, the time for my hobbies. So no, there was not really any hobbies except,
Alarm. Excuse me.
There was no hobbies during school, really, I would say. So yeah, that's that for school. The professional life is different, and there always been hobbies or interests, I would say. I don't think I was ever committed to I don't know. I don't play music, so I was never in a band or like had friends who would meet and like play music or go to Central Park and like start singing in the streets. So, stuff like that. Like, no, that wasn't the thing. I mean, I studied art, but I'm not a skilled painter or or a drawer or or sculptor or anything like that. So I've never really got to do that. I had a pretty good interest in photography, so that would be something that I would enjoy doing when I had a chance to, and then working, I liked making little things and, have like kind of like side projects and things. And it's not really, I mean, in some ways, some of it was serious because I ended up like making money selling some of the stuff, which, in some ways was not just like for myself or whatever, but actually, it was more for myself when I did it as a way to, like we mentioned, kind of like balance the stress and emotions and thoughts. I felt like doing those things was giving me a place to kind of like turn my brain off or meditate or focus on that one thing and not be allowed to let any other voice in my head like talk to me about stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say hobbies of any levels, like high commitment or small, enjoyable things are, to me, very important. And they don't have to be anything big. I mean, I don't know, you love plants and you like taking care of plants for 3 hours on the weekend. Well, make sure you do that every weekend, like anything that brings you enjoyment and peace and makes you feel good, to me, is some sort of hobby and is crucial to exist. So... it doesn't matter how busy you are with the 9 to 6 or whatever job you're doing, you should always find little rooms for those things, because I do believe that if you skip them, at some point it just like accumulates.
Sure.
And your emotion, your exhaustion, your ability of think creatively or be social or be in a good mood or feel good, like just degrades. So...
Well, that's why you go on vacation.
Yeah, but a vacation is like a little band-aid. It's like,
Sure.
It's a band-aid you put on like maybe once a year, twice a year, maybe for a week, maybe for 3 days.
It's like a cortisone shot.
It's good. It's like you're taking a ginger shot, to feel good for
a ginger shot. Wow.
for a few days.
Potent
Yeah,
ginger.
but something like to energize you a little bit. But I think to be more sustainable in the lifestyle, you need to have little sprinkles of that throughout, like every day if you can. Like it could be anything. It could even be like food related. Like you have your morning routine, whatever you eat, or like.
Well, now we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
We are. Of course we are, because architecture is a very stressful profession, right? And especially when you start working, and if you have your business, and if you have a family, and if you have like whatever's happening in the world, right? Like it all those things to me are super important.
I think it's, I agree with you, right? And this bleeds over into just knowing how to structure your life so you're healthy and happy also.
Yeah, and I want to say this is kind of like on my level of a hobby, which is I don't have any serious hobby that takes me commitment and every week I have to do this or I have to participate, right? Or I feel the need to spend 15 hours doing one thing, That being said, there is people who have hobbies or passions or things that can take a lot of time or a lot of their brain space, right? There is people who do architecture and then maybe on the side they love painting and they need hours and days to paint and paint and paint, right? The process takes longer. And those people, I find it's interesting and maybe a little bit more difficult for them because it's kind of like you're being torn between your job, which is also your passion, which is architecture, because I don't know anyone who's in architecture and is not passionate about it. And if you're not, then why are you even in it?
Yeah.
And something else you're also very passionate about that is not what maybe pays your bills, but makes you extremely happy, right? And sometimes, we've interviewed a lot of people. Sometimes these people try to merge the two, the hobby and the job, to try and basically get to do both more often and more equally, rather than only be able to do the hobby whenever you have time, which could not happen very much, right? And I think there is also there's kind of a risk of losing that, I don't want to say like free space, but like the all of the beautiful things that make a hobby, right? And as soon as you bring that into like the business, I feel like you kind of like lost some of the sparkle of that, and you're on a slippery slope where the I don't know, like I don't know. I just feel like you're losing some of the magic and the freedom of what a hobby is.
I mean, there's this very common thought that if you're passionate about something and you really, really enjoy it and it brings you happiness, don't do that for a living because it taints it, right? So,
yeah, and some people could argue, why don't you do that for a living? Because it makes you so happy. So
right. But there's a lot of good examples as to why that, we said, does not work. You know, the idea of, well, do what you love for your job and you'll be happy every day. It's like, that's not really the reality of, especially if you have your own practice, your own business, right? That's not what...
yeah, and I think what it comes down to is like, let's say you love painting, right? You do like a bunch of canvases and like just love doing that. If you just do it for yourself as a hobby, and now you're trying to turn that into a business, there is, as we know, like a whole other aspect that making a business has to be about. Right. And therefore, now whenever you're painting, you're not just spending 100% of your time painting, you're spending 20% of your time painting and 80% of your time making it a livable thing.
Well, I think it's that, but it's also, in my view, mostly that the thing that was just for you is no longer just for you.
That's true.
Because as soon as you have to make money, that means someone's paying you for it, which means that now it's about them by whatever degree. Yeah. Right. And that's the problem with an artist or an architect or a musician or whatever, is you start worrying about the buyers, the market, the listeners, the clients, and you have to think about them to survive, but also, are you doing it really for them, depending on the profession? I mean, architecture is a service industry, so it's a little bit different, right? We have an obligation to our clients, but if you're an artist, like, do you really care about the people buying your work? And then then you have an agent or someone saying, well, you should do more, pink faces. You're like, I don't want to do any more fucking pink faces. And it just...
Your motivations are changing.
The slippery slope. Yeah, it is true. So, and especially for something as complicated as architecture, I think it's naive to say, if you love architecture, then have your own practice. You can do architecture all the time, and that'll equal a much greater chance of happiness. It's not true. Architecture is tough. You can't do architecture without clients who have a lot of money, without a good team. There's like a lot of other stuff that has to fall into place in order for you to do work that makes you happy, right? Like 90% of the work is just to be able to do the thing that you want to do. Yeah. But back to the point of hobbies and things, I think, I don't know, I understand what you're saying about having the clean kind of separate space to be in, and you're focusing on that thing. And the benefits of it are to have a relief from architecture in this case, to have that exhale, to have that meditative state. For me also, it's like one of the great things about architecture, it's very broad. Like there's the research, the philosophy, the understanding the culture of the people. There's program, so there's function, there's technical stuff, there's conceptual stuff, there's materials, there's views, light, photography, like everything's mixed up in there. But it still is definitely, it is its own thing and has a process to it, and has constraints to it. It is a specific craft. And I feel sometimes as a creative person, you just want to like explore an aspect of creativity that doesn't fit neatly in that process of architecture or the timeline of architecture. And it's just nice to have a different venue or avenue of scratching that itch and exploring those subtleties and the refinement of the craft in a just a different medium, right? And I that's the thing, to be honest, as I'm speaking now, that I miss the most about music was, and I've always said over the years I should get back to playing, but again, 5 minutes, I'm like ultra depressed with myself because I have no more chops. There's that, and it's a different challenge and reward system that's still creative in a certain way, and a craft, but it's different. Architecture, on the contrary, is like, it takes a long time, especially in practice. It's just a very serious thing too, and that's the thing I would say that makes architecture rewarding, but personally for me makes architecture quite frustrating. And maybe the thing I dislike the most about it is that it's very serious. And it should be serious. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but it's like a very, very serious thing that we're doing. And, sometimes I'm like, I don't really want to be that serious about everything. It'd be nice to just do some wacky, cool stuff, try some stuff out. And there's no pressure. There's no lives at stake. There's no structural stuff at stake. There's no program at stake. It's just music. You know what I mean? It's just out there.
Yeah, I was mentioning sometimes people are trying to merge their hobby into their profession in a way that's kind of like maybe too much 50-50 in the mix. But what's interesting is, in the way of balancing the two, but still kind of keep them separate, is that they could influence each other, but still remain separated, right?
Yeah.
So if you are a musician, you don't have to, have an office that is only about music, whatever that means, right? But again, the way you think or create music could influence the way you think about architecture or create architecture. And it doesn't have to be all the time, right? I think that's kind of like the beauty of being an architect, is that we can get influenced and inspired in very many different ways by very many different things, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. It also reminds me, because we've interviewed a lot of people, and I said this to the students, that some of the most interesting and successful people in our industry of architecture and outside of our industry are interesting and successful because what they produce is somehow a mixture of things that you wouldn't expect to be together. And that has been consistent in across all the people we've interviewed and outside of the podcast that we've met. There's something about their background, something about their experience and their education, whatever, that is a little bit different. And they those spices mix together to make something special. And sometimes it's really obvious, and it's like it's branded that way too. And other times it's very, very subtle. But I think it's also sometimes very easy to make the mistake of dedicating too much time to architecture, because I do think that rich architecture is informed by and powered by a deep understanding of life and people and the landscape and everything else. And if you're not out in the world experiencing those things to a degree, then it's really difficult for you to have astute observations about a site, a place, and a people, and then create architecture.
I'm going to start writing down some of the things you say on the podcast.
Because they're so good.
No. And bring them out to you once in a while, just so we make sure we actually, apply the things that we say on here.
No, but see, I've already done my time out in the world. I don't need to go out.
Okay. Now that makes more sense. I was going to say, spending all the weekends talking about architecture is probably not what we should be doing. But here we are.
It's so difficult, though, because it is such a complex thing to do, and it does require a lot of time. I think that the problem is time.
I think the problem is that when you're passionate about things, you just become addicted to it, and it's very hard to separate yourself from that.
True.
And architecture is one of those things that just sticks to your skin, and you can, wipe it off.
If you could pause time and then go, travel, or pause time and study painting, and pause time and do that, and then hit resume, and now have those skill sets and that knowledge and that experience, you would do that. I would do that.
Says the guy who used to do music and band practice at the same time as getting an architecture degree. It seems like you did that so you could keep doing that.
Yeah, it was just so tough.
It sounds exhausting to me.
So difficult. And this may be...
And now a quick break to thank the sponsors who support the second studio.
Hey architects, would you like to get your as-built faster? Of course you would. Well, IPX has you covered. IPX lets you seamlessly transform your laser scans into LOD 300 BIM and CAD files. Whether you've got your 3D scans already or you need a full laser scanning service, IPX offers instant pricing and order tracking for scan to BIM services on any project, no matter the size or complexity. Once a building scan is complete, IPX delivers detailed BIM, CAD, 360-degree virtual tours, and material takeoffs in their platform where you can view, share, export, query, and quantify areas, floors, and materials. Check out the IPX link in our show notes.
If you're an interior designer, you need to check out Programma. Programma is the all-in-one project management software designed to streamline the entire design process. Its cloud-based specification schedules are always up to date, minimizing double handling. This means you can spend less time switching between tools and more time designing. Click the Programma link in our episode notes and use the code SecondStudio at checkout to save 25% on an annual subscription and enjoy exploring all of the other tools Programma offers.
There's another question a student asked, which I forget their question, but maybe it was the same one, but it also had to do with burnout. Like they're having, because this is also, what are we in May or June or whatever, and the students are like, we're like tired because we're like getting to the end.
Well, it's just the beginning of your life, so.
But the thing I said to them is like, actually, for myself at least, and I think for a lot of people, school is a lot harder than practice, because in school you're on your own by yourself, having to navigate all the stuff we just talked about. And when you're designing something, unless you're part of a group of students on a team project in which no one else does any fucking work except you, right? You're on your own. But when you're in the profession and you're out in the world as an adult, it's like kind of structured, right? And as assuming you work in an office where you're not doing crazy hours, like when you're done, you're done. There's no homework. There's no studying for a philosophy exam the next day. You're finished.
Yeah, but
on the
weekends,
if
you
you're
have
not
to decide where to work and do good work, be kept. Think about
what?
Be kept in an office. You can get let go if you're not good. So there is
yeah. But I mean
that's things at stakes. The school is hard only because you have to be organized and autonomous. If you're neither of those, then the school is going to be really hard. But if you are, then it's
Okay, 3 guesses as to what kind of student you were then, since you seem to be thinking school was a breeze.
I think schools seems hard to students. Because again, that's the only thing that they've known so far where they're on their own.
Oh, see, I have a different take on all this. Yeah, okay, let's hear it. Okay.
Right? Like once you've been through school on your own and you go through life, well, life seems less hard because you've already gone through school on your own. So it's more of a, putting things in context and really how hard those things are if you look at them, outside of that context. Being a student in school, everything is like, maybe paid for depending on how it's structured. People will give you a schedule, you have deadlines set up, they tell you like what you should be doing, like you have an environment, you don't have to go hunt for anything. Everything is there, you just have to show up and do the stuff.
So
right?
What's weird is so I think both are true. So I think this came up in the conversation with the Nomos group. So I think what you're saying is true in that the school is easy because you kind of, everything's set up for you, like you said, you just need to go through the checkpoints. And if you do that and you're studious and you pass and whatever, you will have acquired a certain amount of knowledge and then you graduate. It's like guaranteed.
Yeah, and you are within a body of students and you're all going through the same things at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So you're within this community that's moving the same pace as you are.
That's true. It is also true, therefore, that when you graduate and you're in the profession, you're by yourself, let's say.
Yeah.
And no one's helping you navigate your career. You have to make decisions on your own, which is why finding a community or mentor or whatever you call it is helpful or essential, right? I think that's true at that scale that you're describing. I think, however, from a first person level experience and the emotional experience of the week to week, for someone like me, school was really difficult because I'm not inherently organized and I hate schedules. I hate making schedules and thinking about to do this, to then complete it by a deadline. And also, again, in the architecture studio, you have to do everything by yourself. You have to be good at researching, at concepts, conceptual thinking, writing, diagramming,
you also have
model
to
making,
chill and realize
rendering,
that you're there to learn.
Drawing, presentation, all those things you have to be good at.
And you're learning how to do those things.
Right. But in practice, you don't have to, there's not the pressure of saying you will not get a good grade. You will not be qualified as a good architect if you are not stellar at all 7 of those things. That doesn't happen in practice. In practice, the first 3 years you're fumbling around, everyone finds their own natural niche within architecture, and offices oftentimes encourage that because everybody knows the person who's good at all 7 of those things and all-star at all of them is like 1 in a million.
Yeah, but no one says in school that you have to be great at all of it, right?
That is the grading system. When you go when you're in a studio, it's not weighted based on your personality. You're graded based on all of those things. So if you suck at presenting, you get a zero. I don't know. It's not really. It doesn't
Yeah, but I
work
feel
this way.
like
But you don't get a 0 out of 10. You get a 0 out of 10 because you're not good at presenting. You don't get. They don't dismiss presentation skills because you don't like presenting.
no, fine, but you don't have to have like be the top at everything, right? Like,
No,
as
it's
long
not
as-
about being. No. It's not about that. If you're not the top at everything, you're not good and you suck and you're sad. It's that there is the pressure of performing well across all of those marks, right?
Okay.
Right.
I don't know. I didn't go to school here, so my grades weren't like,
Of course,
different.
of course, at any school, right? Like the 7 things I mentioned,
Yeah.
right? You're meant to be learning those things, and you're supposed to be succeeding and doing well in all of those things,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not really saying that the grades are actually calculated based on that, but that is the system. Whether or not that translates to the grade itself is different because grades are inflated, blah, 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 blah. But that's the pressure. So as a student, you have to be good at all those things. You're training to be good at all those things. You are performing and presenting in front of everybody in the presentation and in the studio with their work on all of those things. And that's really, really difficult to do on top of managing your life and your schedule and your GEs and
But those
taking
are things
tests.
you're also gonna have to do when you're working. So I mean, it's nothing.
No, what I'm saying is you do those when you're working to a degree, but pretty quickly when you're practicing, you find out, you probably already know actually, like, okay, for an example, I suck at client presentations. The office says, no problem. You're super skilled at production drawings and you love that. Then that's what you're going to do mostly at this office. You're going to be in the technical department of doing that work.
Yeah.
That's how offices, that's what I'm saying. Like, no one in an office really expects of
Well, it depends the size of the office too. If you're working in a 500 people office, then yeah, they can pigeonhole you to do that one specific thing you're really good at, and you never have to get better at anything else than that. If you work in a 2-person office, then guess what? You're gonna have to be good at all of it because it's only you and the other guy.
You're going to have to be better at all of it. But again, there's not that expectation. There's no boss who's like, I expect you to be an all-star across all 7 things. If not, you're fired. That never happened because that person doesn't exist as up to 1 in a million, right? So even in small practices, you might have to do it. You might suck at it, but it's not the same thing because I'm hungry. Apparently my stomach is rumbling because offices realize like, okay, everyone does have their own skill set and interests, even within architecture. And you find your own path in that way. In addition, I would say from a young architect's perspective, the great thing about practicing as a professional, aside from the fact that when you're done with work, you're done, like I said before, and you don't have homework for a structures class. The other great thing is that when you're young and you don't know something and you're working on a project, you're not the only one working on the project. You have senior staff probably sitting right behind you. You turn around and say, hey, I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm doing here. Can you help me? And then they educate and help you and you draw correctly or whatever the task is. When you're in school,
But you said you have the same thing in school. You have senior students that you can go to your teacher. You can ask your friends who are good at it to explain things to you. I mean, the support system is there too.
It's not really the same thing because, first of all, you have to trust that the other people around you in school
that's your own problem.
are smart enough to have anything of value to say regarding your project. It's also different because it's your
and so
own...
does your colleague in your office.
But it's
the
different.
guy that's been working there for 20 years might not be the best.
No, but they're
to
vetted
give
because
you
they're
feedbacks.
part of a closed system, which is the office.
Yeah.
And also that project is not your project. It's the office's project. You're on one team. You are literally on the same team. In school, you're not really on the same team with your students, with your classmates. You're more like team members, but also competitors, frankly. So the vibe, we've talked a lot in the past about how practicing as an architect is challenging and toxic workplaces and all that kind of, let's say, more negative aspects. But I mean, truly, I think like the bright side of looking at it when you're a young professional is like when you graduate, you're going to be at a place, hopefully it's a good office, let's say, or a decent office. You can have a support system. You have people who are older. They're vetted and they're going to help you because they're helping themselves by doing that. I mean, it's a really wonderful thing.
Yeah, but
And you get paid to do it. It's amazing.
At the same time, the time in school is like 5 years in school, right? A career could be like, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 45 years.
What does that mean?
Well, that means that for it to like feel and, you know, be as simple and easier as it sounds like it should be, and no, it's gonna be ebbs and flows. It's gonna be like a windy road, and there's gonna be bumps, and it's not gonna be that cushy, you know.
No, I'm not saying it's going to be cushy for 25 years. I'm saying as a young person who just graduated, there are positive things to look forward to when you're practicing. And those are some of the things.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you just want to bring it down.
I mean, yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, the first few years after you graduate are, you know, the most fun and exciting ones, sure.
I think also you have a different perspective on it because you were a very different student from me. Like if there was a graph of different student types, we were on opposite ends of the spectrum.
Well, I was, and I also like moved country after I graduated from school to start my, you know, working life, which in a place I knew no one and nothing. So to me, that was much harder than school was, you know, because school is just, it's cool. It's a different level. It's this and that, but it's, you know, it's not, again, I mean, nobody's forcing you to go and do that. So if you can't figure it out.
Do what? School or practice?
Do school. Nobody's forcing you to go and study architecture for 5 years, right? So if you can take care of yourself for 5 years and show up to class and do the work and you know, learn and ask questions and figure it out, then go do something that's easier. You know what I mean? Like...
Yeah, I that's you can't have that mentality. It's a horrible mentality and advice to give to people. What the hell? You can't say that to students.
But you made your choice. If it doesn't work for you, then maybe, you know, you're meant to be doing something else.
It sounds like you're advocating for people to just give up if they're not good at it.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you should figure out the way, I don't know, like be an adult. Like, I don't know.
Oh, God. No, it's true. It's true.
I personally didn't feel like, I mean, school was hard because it was a lot of work. It was a lot of hours. It was a lot of questions. It was a lot of like, you know, like introspection on yourself and like, what does your design wants to be? What does that tell to people? And like all of those big questions and all of that. School was hard, I feel, in the creation of what you're doing, not in what it is to go through school.
So again, super different for me because both
that
were
was my
a challenge.
experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, people who are like very creative and very gifted and all of that, maybe that was no big deal for them. But that's the part that I felt was the most difficult for me was to...
Okay, so the challenge of the work itself in school, right? If we think about that in your experience, you know, what happened, and then you transition to the practice, how did those two compare? What was that like? Did you find that
it was still challenging because it was a completely different way to approach the creative process, the thing that you're creating, what you're creating, the meaning of what you're creating. So, I mean, as we spoke before, right? Like the way you think about architecture in school and the way you think about architecture outside of school, it's like two different things. So that has its own challenge because it's not something you were trying to think about that in that way.
Were there things when you entered the profession after you graduated that, how do I phrase this, would be encouraging to hear as a student who's about to graduate?
Wait, say that again.
Were there things that took place in the first 4 years of you practicing after you graduated that current students would benefit from hearing about that encourages them about the profession? Is encouraging?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think first you have the shock of like what it is to work in an office, and you have no idea what that is until you start, right? So that's kind of like, oh, okay, like what am I doing now? I have to like, you know, you have kind of a freak out moment, like now I have to learn everything again, but like in a completely different way. But the exciting thing is that you're not the first one to do that. Like everybody goes through that mode, and as you move through the different firms, the different projects you're working on, you're building back up, you know, the skills that you've learned in school in the way that is being used in the profession. So you feel like you are still evolving, I think, as you get older as an architect, which to me is the most exciting, is the things that you keep learning and discovering.
So would you say that it was harder those first 3 years after you graduated, or easier than school?
I mean, I could see your point. Like, they could be,
Yeah.
no, I could see your point, but no, but the thing is, it's easier and harder on different aspects.
Sure.
Right? It is harder because, again, you have to make decisions that are going to impact your life, your future, and the places you might end up being in life later on, or the projects you're going to end up being able to work on, depending on what firm you've worked at, and the previous stuff you've learned, and what you found out you're good at in the profession. What you were great at in school might not be what you're great at when you start working. So,
like for example,
I don't know. Maybe you were great at presentation in school, but guess what? Like, the way office do presentation with clients has nothing to do, and therefore you're not that person. I'm just making stuff up, right? So what was I saying? I'm getting tired here.
Yeah.
So I think that was maybe like what was harder is kind of like those. The bigger questions of life, apply to the field of architecture that you study once you start working. And those are things that only you can make those decisions and can decide which direction you're going. There is no one that's in school. There is no teacher like holding your hand and saying, oh, maybe you should consider this. Oh, maybe you should consider that.
When you're practicing.
You're on your own. You're on your own.
Yeah.
And for fuck's sake, if you move to another place, another country, like, you have no one to tell you where you should be going.
Did you just swear?
Yeah. You don't know what firm is good, what firm is not good. You don't know how much money you're supposed to make. You don't, all of those things.
You know what's weird is, like, I have, and this is like a sort of a revelation. I have the complete, I agree with everything you're saying, and it is true. But for me and what I experienced, it was like the total opposite. I was not nervous at all about entering the career. I was not nervous at all about like the trajectory of the career, about all the stuff you said.
You didn't have to switch from metric to imperial.
Well, it's sure.
And learn like the New York building code and all that stuff. I'm like, what is the building code? What? Zoning diagram. I'm like, what? I've never learned that.
Well, but I didn't know that either, right? So I think there's actually a lot of things.
I guess that makes me feel better.
Yeah, there's a lot of like. So you came from France, United States, and there's definitely a whole list of stuff that's more challenging because of that.
I mean, technical words, man. Cantilever. I didn't know what that meant.
Right, yeah. But at the same time, a lot of the stuff that you didn't know, and then therefore was a challenge. Just overlap with anyone who just graduated from school because you just don't know anything about the profession.
Probably, like therefore you should move abroad if you want to.
Yeah, honestly, it's easier, especially to do it at that time in your life.
Because you're still fresh and you're going to learn and pick up things much faster than if you do that 10 years later. Yeah. It's maybe that's why, in a certain sense, in practice, we are complementary because for me, it's like, it's the opposite. Like I really struggled in school on my own. In terms of the big, this actually really makes nice sense now. In terms of like the big picture arch, arc of thinking of careers and this and that, all the stuff you mentioned, like, not concerned. I wouldn't say it's a breeze because it takes a long time to unfold. Yeah.
But like, I'm not concerned. I can problem solve that in my mind and think about all the angles of it. Not an issue. Someone giving me a task of designing a whole structure by myself, especially as a student, and then also make sure you show up to class for this other thing and structure yourself. Impossible. I couldn't do it, and I got through, but obviously, because I've had nightmares about missing stuff, I did not do it so very successfully.
Are you sure you went through?
I don't know.
Do you have your diploma?
When I did grad school, I still had some of the, I guess, PTSD. So for one of my classes or two of them, I never even checked my grades. I didn't want to know. I did get a diploma. I'm like,
are you sure it's your name on it, not someone else?
I'm pretty sure I got a diploma.
You might go check after this.
But Yeah, so it's funny. I mean, so for listeners who are like me, there is some kind of relief, a sense of relief to be had, because when you graduate and you go and practice, if you're at a good office, there's these things that take
Or
place.
you're hunted forever.
But the downside is you will be haunted forever. Yes, by some of these nightmares. If you miss, I mean, I legit, the nightmare of showing up and missing a midterm. That legitimately happened to me. I didn't miss it, but it happened to me twice in two different ways. So just fun stories. So one was a course taught by the dean of the college I was a part of, and I overslept, and I lived in a dorm apartment way up on a hill. So it was not like easy to get down to campus, and definitely not easy to get back up late at night. And woke up. I was like, oh my God, I'm late for, I think it was the final exam. Get on my bike. And it was a 9 a.m. class too, which for a college student like me, it might as well have been 4 o'clock in the morning. I haul ass going down this hillside so fast, and it was not awake. I barely had 2 shoes on. And I remember getting across this courtyard, and I'm going through this courtyard that had grass and a narrow kind of paving sidewalk cutting through it. I'm going down there, and there's 2 people in front of me on the sidewalk. So I'm I'm not going to crash into people, so I'm going to go off into the grass. But I'm so tight on time, I don't want to do a big curve around. I want to go straight, A to B, the fastest way to get there. So anyone who rides bikes, I didn't have off-road tires. They were kind of hybrid tires, so they're pretty slim.
I was going to say, you can only go on grass if you have bigger tires.
And so the deal is, when you transition from a raised, sidewalk to the grass, you need to commit and go off at a steep enough angle. Otherwise, what happened and what did happen, your tire gets stuck between the sidewalk and the grass. So I blast past these people, and I get stuck 10 feet in front of them. And I just tip over, like a scene from Curb Your Enthusiasm. And then I can hear them laughing. And I vaguely recognize these people also.
Oh, no.
And so because I fell over just right in front of them, by the time I'm getting up, they're now passing me. And I'm I had a plaid long sleeve flannel thing and Crocs, and I was I'm late for a midterm, to try and explain why I'm doing this. Get on the bike, get back, get to the place. I realize my alarm went off at the right time. I didn't read my clock, so I got there plenty on time. And so I get in there, and I never went to this class. I think I didn't even know, I barely knew where it was. And I get in there, and I'm there's no place to put my bike inside of the class, because I didn't know what the classroom was like.
Oh my God.
So I stick my bike in the back, I grab a seat. Who walks through the door? There's 2 people I pass because they're in my class, and they sit down next to me. I probably smell horrible. And they're this kid fell on his bike, got back up, hauled ass because I thought I was late. This fucking idiot. You were not late to class. You were on time. And then I didn't even have a pencil. So I think I borrowed a pencil from the guy that I passed on the bike. That was one example. There's another story too, but
God, sounds so stressful.
It was pretty stressful. It was pretty. So now you see.
Yeah, I could have never been friends with you in school.
Now you see.
Yeah, and I understand why school was harder than professional life. Also because the professional life, I was around, so I was making sure that we would wake up in the morning and get to work.
But the funny thing also is that in the professional setting, you can't miss work. In school you can miss a class. You can't miss a day of work. You do that, and then enough times or whatever, you do get fired.
And then one day you show up to your office, and your seat is taken by someone else because they replaced you.
Yeah, so I never had that nightmare, which is to tell you things changed. Once I graduated, also because the parameters were different. It's very real when you have to work to make money to survive. Yeah. And you're in a new city, in the case for us, and if you don't do that, then you don't survive, and the stakes are different. So anyway, yeah, that was one of a few different stories in school.
Did you change bike after this? So you could
No, I had
actually zoom.
that's another just small bike story is, like I said, that apartment was way up in the hill and it was really, really difficult. I mean, it was a trek to get up there. And
Was
of
it
course,
cheap? Is
the
that why?
architect,
Was it cheaper there?
I don't know, it was on campus, so it was easy and a lot of people lived there. And of course, the architecture building was the other side of the campus at the bottom of like the entire campus, so opposite ends, which meant that when you're in studio working, at 7 p.m., are you going to bike for half an hour uphill?
Yeah.
Like it, like
Have dinner and come
legitimately,
back,
you had to
like-
be really good shape to bike all the way up. Most people would stop and just walk with their bike
Yeah.
the last stretch.
You need a
Are you going
jetpack.
to do that, or
You need a jetpack.
jetpack, or are you going to like sleep in studio? Like, because if you go up there, you're exhausted. Try and eat dinner, shower, then go back down. Like it just. So anyway, one late night, me and a friend of mine were on our bikes going up, and we were super tired and probably inebriated and trying to cope with studio. And there was in the complex an even steeper hillside of grass. And he was like, we should try and race up this hillside. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Like 2 days before a review. And so he did it. I overestimated my athletic abilities. Got halfway up. And I could also hear him laughing as he's witnessing me do it. Got halfway up, and what do? Do I fall over? And so I chose, no, I can probably just do a U-turn and then just go down on the hillside on my bike. Terrible idea. A8 shit. Tore up my pants, was bleeding all over the place. I could hear him laughing at the top because I didn't make it. I chose to bail in the wrong fashion, and I'm surprised that bike survived 5 years. That I think about it. Anyway, so yeah, having hobbies. I think it's a good thing to protect that space, and I will restate what I said before, and I do think it's important, especially for students, even students, to like go and experience life and like see what it's like to be out there and see what people are like and see places to inform your perspective on the world. I think it's hard to draw, accurate or salient conclusions about a project or a concept if you don't have that.
Yeah, it's
Or do it vicariously by reading. I don't know.
It's interesting because again, I'm thinking like I had no time to like have a hobby in school. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that if you don't have any time in school to find your hobbies, that you can find them later in life either. Again, you have downtime, you meet people, you move to a new place, you discover new things. I think that you still have your lifetime to have hobbies. But it's interesting because even now people ask us, sometimes people who are not in the architecture field, they're like, oh, so what's your hobby? What do you do on the weekend? I'm like, hobbies? I still have no time for hobbies.
Yeah. So as much as we've preached,
So as
what
much
we
as we
said,
say you should have hobbies, you should have hobbies.
we don't.
We don't.
No,
But again, I think hobbies can take many forms and take many different chunks of time, small or big.
that's why it got whittled down at some point in the conversation
yeah.
to just making a morning coffee.
Hey, look, I love gardening. Gardening could be my hobby. I don't have a garden, but if I had one, I would garden all the time.
Yeah. I think this is a lot of this conversation, for long-time listeners, they'll know this is kind of in contrast to what I often preach, which is that, especially for students, like you need to spend time at your desk working. You can't be off dicking around. There's no substitution for being at your desk grinding, and grinding meaning that it's not easy, that it might be not productive in the sense it doesn't produce a great design, but it is productive in the sense that you're putting in the time, the miles. It's like training for a marathon. You just put in. It's also sort of like to use an analogy to other hobbies, when you are an athlete or you're a musician, it's an easier thing for me. Like when you go to the practice room and you woodshed, that's an expression, and it means to practice. And actually, woodshedding dates back to a time when you would go to the woodshed outside and practice. I think is where it comes from. And but solitary. There's nothing happening except practicing it. It's not sexy. It's not fun. There are drills. There's things. There's exercises you do. That's not music. And you woodshed. And there's a certain, there's definitely a parallel to like athletes when they train. You do things that are not fun when you're training as an
But
athlete.
shouldn't a hobby be fun though?
But, well, so I'll get to that in a second. So what I'm saying though, architecture is kind of the same thing. In music, when you're practicing, everyone knows you have good days and you have bad days. And when in practice sessions, and I think what makes a really good musician or a musician better than another in the end over the course of 5 years or 10 years or whatever is when they go and they practice even when that day sucks. Like there's so many times I get to the practice room and it's not working, right? I can't hit the notes. These things are off. You're tired or whatever it is, but you do it. And that matters. And the same thing I think applies to architecture as a professional even. You have to spend time trying to problem solve, trying to design something, even if it doesn't produce great things. Even if you're sketching and then at the end of the day, you're like, this was shit. It doesn't really matter that it was shit. You're putting in the time. And that does lead to something in the end for the project. It does also accumulate over years and mean something in the end too. And I think that's very important for everyone to remember, especially students. Like, you have to put in the time, and just because it doesn't result in something amazing to you, it doesn't mean it's not worthwhile.
No, that's a good point. I think that's why I never got into music, like the whole not fun part. Like I very much enjoy listening to music. I don't think I would enjoy playing music because of all that stuff that comes with. That being said, I do that with architecture and I have the problem with it. So that's where to me a hobby should feel fun. It should feel like lighter and an escape and a way to kind of like, I don't know, just breathe and
yeah.
But I mean, I don't know, people take hobbies in different ways.
Yeah, that is it. Well, maybe we'll have to put that aside for another conversation. That's a really interesting one because to be honest, the majority of the time that you're playing an instrument is
it's not fun.
Is not the performance. It's not the fun stuff necessarily.
I mean, I guess it's like people who work out as a hobby, like.
Although that is immediately rewarding, right? You feel the
well,
pump.
It depends. It depends on who you are. It doesn't for everybody, So.
I did 10 push-ups, so it looked different.
It does. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, it's. But so anyway. Let's wrap this up. So we had other
David's
questions.
Hungry, so let's wrap this.
Yeah, my stomach is. I need tacos. So we didn't get to the other questions. So this is good. We'll save them for other recordings. So yeah, summary. I think having a creative hobby, preserving it is important. It's worthwhile for your emotional state, for your creative state. It's just good. And I think if you are organized like Marina is, then you can do it successfully. And if you're not organized, you can still do it like me by fucking just crashing through it.
I'm so organized I have no hobby at the moment. So.
Yeah. And on the subject of burnout in school, again, if you're someone like me, then there is something to look forward to in the profession.
Yeah, and I think also, more like humanly speaking, I think having a hobby is also another way for architects to connect with another body of people that is not architects. And I think that that is in some ways one of the risk of our profession is that in the end you only end up being surrounded by architects. So having that, other arm out there that's reaching out to a different pocket of peoples and communities and whatever, I think is very healthy to have.
Did not do that.
Still don't. But I think it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. No. We do that more of that now of people in related professions that have related interests.
Yeah.
In school, I didn't do that, but whatever. Okay. Well, I don't know if you're listening to this. And this was. If you have questions, then feel free to contact us. You can find us through our website or email, which is hello@secondstudiopod.com. We have an Instagram handle, which is also Second Studio Pod. You can find us on there, follow us. Text us 213-222-6950. If you like the show, leave a review. You can find us in the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, blah, 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 blah. That's it, man. Yeah. Anything else?
We're on Instagram. You can find us there. We have the hotline 213-226-950, and that's it.
I said that already.
I know.
And shout out to the students who hosted, who had the panel and came up with this question, and probably others that we'll answer on the podcast.
You see, you should have invited me. Huh.
It would have been more interesting for sure.
No.
Okay, talk soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.